Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogman, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, how's everybody doing? Good, I hope. Everything is good over here. As you could tell, I'm decked out for the cold weather. And even though I'm inside, it's supposed to drop below freezing. And I'm sure if anybody's been watching the news, it was snowing in the panhandle of Florida. And we got, they were telling us, hey, you might see some snow where we're at. But yeah, as a matter of fact, there's a bunch of great pictures of people skiing, skating in Pensacola. It's great. And from what I understand, some of the stuff this is the first time. There's other times that say, oh, it's record breaking from a few years ago, but this is the first time that they've had this much snow along the Gulf Coast and into the Panhandle. And we're supposed to get a little bit, it's going to go below freezing tonight. So yeah, that kind of deal. I'm decked out like I said, it's like in the, the horror movie, all the villagers, everybody's looking at the setting sun to make sure they're indoors. But over here, yeah, I'm doing the same thing, but it's like, yeah, I don't have to worry about the monster. What I'm worried about, it's called the dipping temperatures, because that's exactly what happens. By 6 p.m., it's like, make sure you're indoors. And yeah, it's one of those deals. It's interesting. Let me tell you, let's face it, even people that I'm meeting people that are from northern states, and by the way, I want to do my one tip off. You want to get cheap ice cream, wait until it's cold. I went to the supermarket earlier, and I'm just going down the aisle very rapidly, by the way, because it was really cold in the freezer aisle. And I'm looking, and there's that freezer with all the ice creams, and it's like, for sale, sale, BOGO, this, all of them. You're the best brands. It's like, yeah, I get it. So if you're into ice cream, this is the time to buy some, because even the best brands are super cheap. And I was like, yeah, baby. It's like, this thing is not moving at all. So yeah, one of those deals that, one of those things that observations of life, like, yeah, you come back in the summertime and they're like 3 times the price. And yeah, you could tell most was, everybody was bundled up, even inside the supermarket. Everybody's like, I have to laugh because, people usually have certain codes that they'll wear, but you could tell people are pulling stuff out and like layering stuff that normally they don't layer, but they don't care because they want to stay warm. So you see people with hats and scarves and a coat, and then the other coat on top of that with a hood. And yeah, it's all over the place. Like, people don't care what it looks like as long as it keeps them warm. That kind of deal. So yeah, yeah, it's like everybody's on the same note. Like, man, stay warm, stay warm. It's all about. I remember one time we had just moved onto the property. There was we had a bunch of wood that had been cut up. I had people constantly coming up, and this was before we had our fence up, and saying, hey, do you mind if we take the wood? I said, sure. I said, we're going to be putting up a fence. Once the fence goes up, you can't. And I realized that there's a lot of people that burned this, because we had like I have very large trees on here. And these were trees that have been brought down, that the logs in some cases were like very, maybe 3 feet across and round. And people would come up and load up on the truckload, and this is basically how they were keeping warm.
Wow.
Because they had wood burning stove kind of deals. So yeah, it's serious. But anyway, let's get on to the good part. The good part is who is the guest today, and his name is Maxim Furek. He's been here before. and he's a former psychologist and rock journalist. He delves into the intriguing world of Bigfoot synchronicity, embracing interdimensional theories, mass hallucinations, and Jung's collective unconscious. His dedication to the subject is evident in the hundreds of accounts from researchers who strive to answer the question, if it's not flesh and blood, then what is it? The question forms the heart of the author's evocative thesis as he tirelessly scours American and Canadian records for evidence of this elusive cryptid. For centuries, early newspaper printed accounts of bipedal creatures variously listed as wild men, hairy giants, or Sasquatch, a narrative that has expanded into a larger scientific, religious, and paranormal reality. This reality, as Furek presents it, is a complex web of scientific theories, religious interpretations, and paranormal phenomena that intersect in the study of Bigfoot. Max's investigation into the tribes of true believers congregating at conferences, campsites, and online websites is a testament to their shared philosophy and Bigfoot's socio-cultural energy. He takes issue with hoaxers whom he charges have sold their souls, but his respect for the believers is unwavering. He challenges traditional beliefs about Bigfoot and encourages readers to embrace the seemingly impossible. After reading his book, your perspective in Sasquatch will be forever changed as you look at traditional science, anthropology, and religion through a different lens and with a different expectations. The last book that he released is titled The Lost Tribes of Bigfoot. Help me welcome him. How are you doing today, Max?
Really good, Marlene. And well, I'm glad you're keeping warm. The last
Yeah.
time I was on Miami Ghost Chronicles was February 22nd,
Yes.
2024. So it's been about a year. So
Yeah.
good to see
Exactly.
you again.
Uh, yeah, absolutely. And it's this subject is so interesting because it's developed like you were there's the two camps. There's the people that think that Bigfoot is an actual animal, maybe a lost
Yeah.
species, whatever.
Hmm.
And then there's the ones that think that there's something either tie them into extraterrestrials or UFO, or even some that think that there's, I don't want to say mystical, but to somehow it has the ability to travel between dimensions. It's like even among Bigfoot people, there's different camps of what they exactly they are. And let me ask you, in your book, is that what you did? You just talked to different people about what they thought it was, or what?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the Lost Tribes of Bigfoot came out of Coleridge Hoodoo, and this is the Lost Tribes of Bigfoot. But
Yes.
Coleridge Hoodoo came out in 2023, and I had two chapters on Bigfoot. One was the Bigfoot hypothesis, and the other was the Bigfoot enigma. I was just trying to figure out what this was, what the theories were, and because of those two chapters in Coleridge Hoodoo, I started to get invites to these Bigfoot expos. It just
Okay.
opened up doors. It was pretty wild the way that happened. So I decided to go and write a book about Bigfoot and take a look at, all the different theories, try to
Mm-hmm.
figure out what it is. But my premise is this: if it's not flesh and blood, what is it? So what are the theories that make sense? And to me, the interdimensional theory, and that's something that was proposed by Einstein, Jacques Vallée, John Keel, all these people. But Einstein back in the 30s talked about the wormhole or bridge theory, that just maybe space-time continuums have wormholes, and you could theoretically travel from A to B through this wormhole, instantaneously. That makes sense. When you talk about paranormal abilities of Bigfoot. I know Rosemary Ellen Guiley talked about something
Yes.
called bilocation or
Yes.
rapid transport, that there's Bigfoot in front of you and then it's behind you. It seems to shape shift
Mm-hmm.
between different spaces. So I think that this, shows that there's some sort of supernatural paranormal abilities that this cryptid has. Um, in so many occasions when we see a Bigfoot, we also see orbs or flying
Yes.
saucers. And that seems to be pretty endemic in Western Pennsylvania in a place called Chestnut Ridge that just has more Bigfoot sightings and UFOs than, are possible. I
Right.
mean, it just seems like everybody's seeing them, but there's a 4 or 5 county area out there that's just ripe with sightings. And again, not just Bigfoot sightings, but Bigfoot with orbs, Bigfoot with saucers. So there seems to be another element there. So that connection with orbs and saucers, that by location, the fact that people claim to have shot Bigfoot with 22s and things, and the creature is impervious to the bullets. So like almost
Right.
like supernatural ability. So there's all these things that are piling up. You know what J. Allen Hynek would call high strangeness. So we have all these elements of high strangeness surrounding Bigfoot that just shows that this creature is more than flesh and blood, but is indeed a supernatural creature. So that's the road that I was traveling in the Lost Tribes of Bigfoot. And Marlene, like you said, there's several different camps, but the one camp, just believes in there's a body out there and there's DNA out there, although
Right.
we haven't been able to come up with any of that evidence at this point. And they look at people like me as being on the woo side, the wooers or the Dr. Woos, and who look at interdimensional or intergalactical or supernatural theories. And
Right.
a
Well,
lot
they
of
think that the reason why a body like a dead is that they say, hey, if this animal dies in the forest somewhere, it'll disintegrate, within days
yeah,
between scavengers, the
yeah,
insects, this is just because no skeletal remains, how's that, have been
yeah.
found, that doesn't mean anything. This is how
Yeah.
they think.
Yeah, and okay, as a proof, I live on the Gulf side. I'm like 14 miles from the Gulf in Citrus County.
Hmm.
There was a wild pig that was hit. So every day we're watching the carcass getting
Hmm.
smaller and smaller.
Right.
The vultures and everything pecking it away. It took about 2 weeks for it to
Right.
finally dissipate, where that hide was just about flattened and it was
Hmm.
about gone. But 2 weeks, 14 days. So yeah, I mean it. And in the woods, you have more
Oh yeah.
scavengers.
Yes.
So I mean, so the fact that we don't have a body doesn't
Or
necessarily.
skeleton or anything like that,
And
yeah.
again, what is a lack of proof doesn't necessarily prove anything.
Of
You know.
course, and that's where you have the people that think of it that it's strically an animal. How's this? That it's
Hmm.
strictly an animal. That there's nothing metaphysical or mystical about it. And then of course how's this? We also don't know what are their numbers. What's their lifespan? How often do they
Right.
procreate?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are they
Yeah.
sparsely? You know,
Yeah.
how often? You know, do they? Is there more than we think there is?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Jeff Meldrum, when he was at the Ocala Bigfoot Expo a couple years
Mm-hmm.
ago, he talked about he had a formula for how many he thought there were. He looked at the black bear population to extrapolate some of his statistics, trying to figure out how long one of those creatures would live, looking at their common enemies and all that. So he had some good scientific data, but all theoretical stuff.
Right.
And the other thing, I just want to piggyback on what you said about, or what we were talking about lack of evidence. Well, you know, in a court of law, you don't need proof of evidence for conviction. And there have been people that have been convicted of crimes without that body, without that
Right.
proof. So,
Right.
if there's that means, motive, and opportunity, that may be good enough in a court of law. So you
Sure.
don't
Sure.
necessarily need that smoking gun or
Yeah,
that
once upon a
stinking
time you
body.
did, but that late, there's been cases where people have gotten convicted without the actual body having been found.
Yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And the as a matter of fact, uh the when you were talking about that the area out there in what is it? In
Pennsylvania, yeah.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
I think
Central
it's like
Ridge.
a right, it's like a 300-mile. And I think Stan Gordon has been taking, he lives out in that area, and I
Yeah,
believe that he's been tracking um the the sightings of Bigfoot with the sightings of UFOs, and they kind of like swing together at the same time,
yeah,
where there's an uptick of UFO sightings and there's an uptick of Bigfoot sightings.
yeah, yeah.
So then you go in that direction. Are they tied into each other, or is it
Yeah.
coincidental?
As well as Thunderbirds and Dogmen and all the rest. But
Mm-hmm.
in the current issue of Fate magazine, I have an article on Chestnut Ridge, and it may be a portal. It may be one of those weird anomalies where a lot of strangeness seems to be happening, but I don't know. But I mean, the thing about Stan Gordon, Stan's been doing this for a long time, and whenever the state police get a report of a flying saucer or a UAP or a Bigfoot, they tell these people, the witnesses, to contact Stan, and Stan will go and document this. And he's almost like the FBI. He has,
Right, right, yeah. He's got God, so many years of
yeah,
records of record keeping. It's
yeah.
incredible.
It really is. And so we're fortunate that we have guys like Stan Gordon in Western Pennsylvania
Yeah.
to keep tally.
Yes,
And
that
in,
he
in
has
my
that
case,
history.
yeah. And in my case, being from northeastern Pennsylvania, we're snowbirds, but uh, a neighbor of mine saw not one but two Bigfoot creatures in
Okay.
Mackinac. This is where we're from, tiny little mountain community. And
Okay.
one was cinnamon colored, the other was black. One was taller than the other one. And I asked this guy Joe several times what it was like, and he said that they turned around and looked at him like they were curious, not
Okay.
afraid, and then they walked off like humans, not like bears or anything else. So I took his story, and then I contacted Stan Gordon, and Stan contacted him and wrote down this narrative and accredited me as the, I don't know what, contact person or whatever. But and then another one, again, this is northeastern Pennsylvania, but a friend of mine named Craig Long, he was a former law enforcement official. Now he's the district magistrate. But when Craig was the sheriff, he got a call around 11 o'clock at night. This older guy was leaving his dog out to take a leak, and he saw this creature, like 11, 12-foot tall creature. And the guy said he wasn't afraid because this creature, he thought it was a Bigfoot. He said this creature had kind eyes. It had kind eyes. And so it
That's
looked
good.
at him and he walked away. And I'll tell you what, in so many of these eyewitness cases, Bigfoot is not aggressive. Bigfoot does not charge and kill. Bigfoot looks, they're curious, and then they walk away, just like Patterson Gimlin's Patty.
Right, right, right.
So, so,
Yep.
so we have a pretty good profile of what Bigfoot is, what people are seeing, how they behave. Uh, and I know there was an article in one of the New York papers, and the reporter ended up with the conclusion that Bigfoot is pretty boring. That Bigfoot doesn't charge you like a monster and everything.
Right, yeah, yeah.
It's
All
pretty.
the
It may stink, but it's not. But it walks
Well,
away.
you know
So
what? And this is just, and I'm not saying this is the case, this explains it. But you know that there's different versions of Bigfoot, that they kind of name according to the area.
yeah.
And there's one, he's been sighted out of by the Grand Canyon. Okay,
Okay.
I think they call it the Mogollon or Mogollon monster or something like that. And I think the first time that somebody actually the newspapers wrote about it, because sometimes when you research, it was that back in 1903. But what's really interesting, which by the way was a very good description of it, it just so happens that that same year, all right, there's another little article that got published where the sheriff, all right, of Tombstone got a guy that they called a wild man. But what it was
Oh,
is this man was insane, and he had been seen frequently out in the mountains in the Huachuca, and they had to lasso him. And like, in other words, this man, apparently he had, his hair was grown out, his beard, everything, his nails and stuff. And finally, they I guess after a while, people kept seeing him running around the area, and they brought him in. But you know, makes you wonder how many of these sightings. Sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, because obviously this guy was not 7, 8, or 9 feet tall or anything like that,
yeah,
are mistaken for a Bigfoot, when in reality it was just a guy that
yeah,
was running wild, and all his hair had grown out, and he was just like, I guess, scavenging until they picked him up. Probably
yeah,
took him to an asylum, I imagine. This was like
yeah,
back in 1903.
yeah,
But yeah, they and see, and that's the thing, that Bigfoot is known for coming into people's campsites while they're sleeping. you know? In other words,
they're not they don't do the I'm gonna walk away kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They come and investigate.
Uh,
They go into campsites, so they
mhm.
all sometimes have a different, I don't know, behavior.
Well, they seem to be curious, for
Yep.
one thing. But they talked about all the wild men sightings from way back when. But even in Florida, we have our version of the swamp ape. But there's a
Yes.
couple of other ones too. In Putnam County, they had the Barden booger, which is supposed to be
Hmm.
like a 10-foot tall creature that carries a lantern. And there's been stories about that for the longest time. And then even down in Sarasota, there was the thing, the Mayaka skunk ape. And this was the interesting one because there were some people there that had porch cameras and they
Wow.
took pictures of this Miyaka skunk ape.
Hmm.
And Lauren Coleman took a look at it and he said it looked like either an orangutan or maybe a Bigfoot that resembled an orangutan or a creature that looked like an orangutan that was maybe like the link between Bigfoot or whatever. So but Coleman thought whatever it was for real, but he didn't know for sure what it was. But it looked like an orangutan, and a lot of these the skunk apes are either have either dark brown or reddish hair, and they're smaller than the Bigfoot that you would find in the Pacific Northwest.
Right, right, right.
So
Yeah, like the skunk ape. And
yeah,
Mayaka is very close to Lake Okeechobee.
okay,
So that's a very good food source for them
yeah,
as far as there's a lot of fish out there.
yeah,
As a
yeah.
matter of fact, a lot of sports fishermen go out there on Lake Okeechobee.
Yeah. And where we live, I live in Citrus County, but we're close to that green swamp by Lake and Sumter counties, which is
Hmm.
a humongous acreage, 110,000 acres. And then also the Ocala National Forest, like
Yes.
607 square miles. So there's, plus the Everglades, 16 counties from
Yes.
Miami-Dade up to what is it,
Yes.
up to Polk. So there's plenty of places for the
Oh yeah.
swamp ape to hide. A lot of researchers claim that because of development, a lot of the sightings were seen in the 1970s, but
Yes.
because of development, they're hiding or they're going up to Georgia. That's the
I believe also in the theory that they might have some type of migration that comes and
yeah,
goes depending. Yeah, I
yeah,
do. I
yeah,
believe that's possible.
yeah.
You know,
So
maybe
it's
they follow their food. Maybe.
yeah, right, yeah. And it's interesting just to look at some of the theories of what they are and what they do. And I mean, I get when I do these podcasts, people ask me, well, what would you do if you saw a Bigfoot? It's a big one. Or what do you think they do all day? And
Look for food.
yeah, I think so. Yeah. And they
If you're
probably do.
that big, you know how many calories an animal that big needs to consume in order to maintain itself. So I would think the majority of its day is taken up in eating
Yeah.
or hunting or something.
Yeah.
Whatever, however it
Mhm.
feeds itself, just to maintain its body weight, its body mass,
Yeah.
uh, and everything else that goes with it.
Hmm.
And I think also that I also believe that they're probably really, really, really good at camouflage. At standing very, very still
Hmm.
and camouflage and all the things that normally, catch your eye, like a little bit of movement, that they're really good at just standing really still. So you
Hmm.
just don't see them. You just go over them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's probably how they survive. So yeah, that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yes.
Um, and then there's people I know that claim to talk with Bigfoot, that Bigfoot are the teachers and they're the students, that Bigfoot teaches them things and gives them gifts like feathers in a box in a locked room in a locked house. I mean, it gets pretty bizarre fast. So, I mean, I don't know.
But yeah, I
My
hear you. Yeah, sometimes I think that that's possible, but I think I've heard of other things where either they get territorial, you'll even have people that go to a certain area and it doesn't always happen, and you think, is it a mating season?
Yeah,
Is it they have young in the area, or they kind of not they don't confront, but you could tell it's like you're not wanted there,
yeah, right,
kind
yeah,
of.
yeah. And some of the Sasquatchers say that these wood structures are a way of
Yes.
warning us away from their territory.
Yes.
So I hear that.
Yes. Yes. And the whooping and
Yeah,
uh, that we really don't know what that means. Is it challenging? Is it a mating call?
yeah.
Is it this is my area? Get out of here.
Hmm.
But sometimes, and the reason why I say that is that you see some of these people doing these whoop calls, and I'm thinking, uh, do you really know what you're calling it? I mean, you might be trying to communicate, but you don't know what you're saying.
Yeah. Isn't this sort of like some of these kids, the ghost hunters that go into these mental
Yeah.
institutions or former
Yes.
prisons looking for spooks, looking for demons? I mean, come on,
Yes.
be
Yeah.
careful what you're looking for.
Oh yeah. They want to make it exciting, and then they get more excitement than they bargained for.
Exactly. Yeah. And nobody talks about that downside.
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
No,
I mean,
there is, and I've spoken to people that have had experiences, and they've done that confrontation kind of deal, and they've had pretty negative experiences after the fact because they didn't realize what was there. One of them had gone to it. I want to say it was either an old asylum or an old hospital, but there was one floor at the top which was supposedly where they kept, I guess, people that were violent or
yeah.
you
Hmm.
know and they did one of those confrontation kind of deals, supposedly to thin air, and they had some really bad experiences after the fact.
Hmm.
As a matter, and it's like, well, you know what? Sometimes, again, for all you know, it might just be thin air and there's nothing there. But what if there isn't?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And yeah,
um, there back home, there was this old school, and nobody. It was vacant. Nobody was in there, and the electricians or workers were on the first floor, and on the second floor they saw this little boy. Now there shouldn't have been anybody there for decades, so they
right,
came back with this electrician who had a heat sensor, and again I don't know what kind that was, but they were able to detect a heat source on that second floor where they saw that little boy. So
right,
again, I don't know what that was, but it indicated there was something going on there. It wasn't a dead rat, and it wasn't a space heater. It was something,
okay,
some heat signature. So um, again, and this was told to me several times by this guy that he's an electrician, but I mean he's not a paranormal guy. I mean he has
mm-hmm,
no interest or belief in that, but that's what he saw. So pretty amazing.
right. Yeah, you'll have sometimes people, as far as witnesses, that they'll and they themselves are very skeptical, but they'll say, well, this is what I came up, let's say, with certain instruments, which by the way are great witnesses because they're not there like to prove the existence of something.
Yeah.
They're just there to like, well, I observed this and I
Hmm.
don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Especially when you go to some of these buildings where supposedly there is no electricity running through it and hasn't been for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you get
Yeah.
some anomalies that you're like, okay, what is causing this?
Hmm.
And again, have you heard? I'm sure you have. Well, wait a minute. I that there's a connection between dogmen and cemeteries, and I was like, okay, all right, that's interesting. Um, and of course, the same thing. I have never heard of it per se for Bigfoot,
Oh.
except that sometimes they're just. I want to say that they are territorial. I believe that they are territorial about certain places.
Were you saying there's a connection between Bigfoot and cemeteries?
No, dogmen,
Oh,
dogmen.
Dogman. Okay, yeah, yeah.
Dogmen and cemeteries. So somebody's been saying that somehow sightings of dogmen are more frequent around cemeteries, especially, you know how you have these family or these old forgotten cemeteries out in the middle of nowhere in the
Sure, yeah,
woods,
yeah.
and that they seem to be. I don't know exactly how they would be connected, unless again we go to the theory of a portal
Yeah.
or some type of vortex, or then you ask yourself, I'm sure you've heard where maybe you have a UFO that's coming into this dimension, whether it's a portal or a rip or whatever, and these cryptids, whether it's a dogman or a Bigfoot, they kind of slip in, at the same time.
Yeah.
Not that they have any mastery over it, you just go through.
Hmm.
and it make that's why sometimes you see the correlation of Bigfoot sightings and UFO sightings.
Right.
All
And
right.
and Tesla talked about it. He said, if you want to know the secrets of the universe, look at the vibration and frequency, you know, all of that. I think that's where the discoveries are going to be made. And, I think that's the quantum physics and the string theory and all these things that are there, but very few of us understand what they are, So I think we have existing theories that can explain some of the anomalies. And rather than looking at these theories and really understanding them, a lot of researchers go and invent new theories, brand new theories, and then we were left with the original theory that they don't know about, and then here's a brand new theory that they don't really know about that either. So
Mm-hmm.
it just confuses the thing. I say let's start with science. What do we know? And with the most basic thing is cause and effect. Like when you see an apple drop, and
Right.
you watch it drop, and you know that it drops because of Newton's theory of gravity. So that's an easy one.
Exactly.
But then when you see orbs and sightings and apparitions and everything, you see them. That's the effect, but we don't know the cause, and the cause could
Exactly.
be scientific. And many times it may be, but we just don't know what that scientific rule is, that application is.
Well,
So,
right, and they can't, like you said, if let's say something in gravity, you can go into a laboratory and reproduce it, drop it and it's gonna come down. In this case, when you're talking whether it's orbs or anything having to do with a lot of the paranormal, you cannot reproduce it at
yeah,
will in a laboratory setting,
yeah,
and that's where people say, well, if you can't reproduce it under controlled settings, then so I think that's what happens even with people that are studying people that are psychic, that even remote viewers, that some days they're great and other days they're just dry,
yeah,
and it's not something that it comes and goes. It's not a steady, like gravity, like you said, it's always there.
yeah,
you know it's always present, and I think that that's where that vague the hardcore scientists will say, well, I don't know about that. And again, we come into, you know let's go down the road of it's a real animal. Let's say,
yeah,
was it a version of a great ape that developed on its own, just
hmm,
went off and developed? uh was this something that we don't even know about,
yeah.
as far as because maybe we haven't ever dug up an old fossil? What was this last little creature hobbit that they found? What was it in
Oh, yeah, the Hobbit in
oh
maybe
my god,
Somalia or someplace.
no, it was like it was on one of the islands over there, Indonesian or something like
Yeah,
that.
okay, right, yeah. And it was
And
maybe
that was like a
3 or 4 foot.
right, that they found it. And up to then, nobody knew that it existed because there was no fossil record
Hmm,
to say that it existed.
hmm.
All right. Because we can't even say, well, we found a, let's say, there was up in the north, that there's a lot of mastodon bones that have been found up in the northwest,
Hmm.
because that used to be the area of mastodons. And I've read where back in the even the late 1800s, turn of the century, there were sightings up in Canada where they were saying that they had seen mastodons,
Oh, wow,
live
okay,
ones.
yeah.
Okay. So it's one of those deals that they kept saying, okay, we know that they were around, that men and mastodons at one time existed at the same time.
Hmm.
But as far as we that's how we know they existed, because we found the fossils. And I mean, as a matter of fact, very good specimens. But that's the thing, you know, is there a possibility that this thing could have persevered, very few in numbers, into modern times? When I say modern times, I'm saying some of the sightings that some of these fur trappers and hunters were having up in the northwest, up in Canada, and everything, of mastodons that were still alive. And I believe one of the stories I heard was that the mastodons were doing, how they talk about the elephants, that they go to a certain place to die,
Correct, yeah.
that the mastodons had the same behavior. where it wasn't that, unless they were, overcome by something. Normally, if when they were going to go to die, they had an area where that's why nobody's found anything more recent. But as a matter of fact, there's a lot of creeks and everything around there that they would just find mastodon stuff all over the place.
Hmm.
Makes
Yeah,
you wonder,
yeah, yeah.
are we
Well,
having the same kind of thing with the Bigfoot, where they're around and they've always been around and they just have become more elusive?
yeah. Well, the theories are it could be a relic of Neanderthal. It could be connected to Gigantopithecus, which
Right.
looked like an orangutan, and
Right.
allegedly came over the Bering Strait and came into the
Mm-hmm.
Pacific Northwest. So that's a theory. But the people that talk about the missing link is, I believe they're totally wrong. My theory is, I mean, and this is confirmed by primatologists and that man and ape had a single common denominator, single common ancestor, and
Right.
the apes split and
Right.
successfully evolved, and then humans
Split.
eventually split, and you had Homo erectus and Neanderthal and Homo sapiens, and so
Right.
we did our thing and learned language and tools and all of that. So when people are looking for a missing link, I mean, they're
There's
trying
no
to
such
put
thing.
man and ape together, and that's just not true. I mean, just it's going
No.
against science, and so you have a lot of people that have hijacked science that talk about that, and also some religious people, that have their own agenda about man walking the earth with the dinosaurs, and
No. Well, I think that they're realizing that when I say modern man as we know it, and we know the ones that came, that they overlapped with Neanderthals and
yeah,
Denisovans, that
yeah,
they've been around for a lot longer than they originally thought. In other words, that modern man has been way, way, way longer around, but not as far as not as far as the dinosaurs.
yeah,
No, that's
yeah,
it's going back millions of years.
yeah,
That doesn't that doesn't jive. But and as a matter of fact, they're finding out like a lot of these remains and also a DNA that what they found out that Neanderthals and modern man and what they called they interbred, so they were around each other long enough
yeah. Well,
to
yeah,
give enough genetic material, but that eventually they all died off.
yeah, and there's some Neanderthal DNA in maybe 30% of human beings. I mean,
I'm
uh,
I'm one of
the
them.
okay, Neanderthal mated with
Yeah.
Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. So
Yes. Yep. Yep. Yep.
yeah,
Which
um,
whereas before there was a theory that that had never happened.
yeah. Well,
So
because I mean, I think a lot of this was religious. I mean, because man was made in the image and likeness of God. I mean, God, it's not very godlike to have Neanderthal DNA. So I think that might have been part of
wow.
that pushback by certain
Wow.
people. But
Yeah.
talking about the dinosaurs and humans, there was a certain thing called the KT event where an asteroid or meteor came down in the Yucatan Peninsula, and that caused the great uh, blackout. That killed all of the non-avian dinosaurs, and
Right.
had ushered in the ice age,
Right.
and then man came later. So I mean, the dinosaurs had been wiped out before.
Right. Yeah. About the only thing that was the small mammals that were already being introduced. That were already those were the only ones. Of course, regulation of their body heat.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what allowed them to, and of
Hmm.
course that they didn't need that much food, and of
Hmm.
course all of a
Yeah,
sudden it's cold
yeah.
because I believe the sun was obscured and all the plant life
Hmm.
kind of
And
diminished.
yeah,
So
and then we had theories about how the dinosaurs became extinct, and then they actually found fossil records there in Mexico, and they found, I think it's called iridium, which is a substance, an element that comes from outer space, not from the Earth. So they
hmm
found this layers of iridium exactly where that KT, I think it was called, event
hmm
took place. So
right,
they were able to go and put two and two together, which is pretty amazing. I mean, when you look at some of
sure.
that science, because we don't have a record for everything, but I think it's good enough to put things together, so we
Well,
can
well, when you were talking about cause and effect, where no, you're seeing okay, we had this event And right now, you can kind of like figure out once this happens, if it happened, this is what's going to happen. It's going to affect the environment, and especially in the area surrounding where it was. And yeah, and then you can understand, and this is what's going to come of it. Who's
Hmm.
going to survive, what animals are going to survive,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. um and again, every because as you know, they have that's the thing about the Bigfoot, which I think is so interesting, that you have some version of Bigfoot, and that's not just in the United States, all over the world.
Right.
Like
Right.
they have the Yeti out
Yep.
in the Himalayas.
Yep.
um and
Almas in Russia and what
yes.
Carpathian Mountains and all that. Yeah, and then so we had our Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest, and then all of a sudden the people from British Columbia said, "Wait a sec, we have known about this creature for centuries. We called it Sasquatch. I mean, and
Yes.
that was known in coastal tribal customs and totem poles and stories.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Sasquatch has been around for a long, long time, and
Right.
supposedly is supposed to be a protector of the environment. And to see a Sasquatch is supposed to be a wonderful thing, a spiritual thing. So,
Right. Exactly. And then we could also go down the road. I'm sure you've heard of all these people, the disappearances, the high
oh,
number of disappearances in national parks.
yeah,
And there's always the how's the theory or the suspicion, maybe, are any of these people that are disappearing, are they being abducted by a Bigfoot? There's
yeah,
always, I mean, besides being abducted by a UFO or an extraterrestrial,
yeah,
or whatever. There's always that. Are these disappearances in these national parks? Is the
yeah,
hand of Bigfoot somewhere in
yeah.
there?
I'll tell you, there's another little side note to that. I don't know if you ever heard of a weird drug called monkey dust,
No.
but it was bath salts, and it wasn't
Okay.
the kind where you take a bath in and make your skin feel good, but it
Uh
was
huh.
it was a hallucinogen, and
Okay.
people did this hallucinogen, and they pretty much got ramped up and became psychotic. But listen to
Okay.
this: in two separate occasions, law enforcement officials, uh, two of them in Western Pennsylvania, did the bath salts. They shot up,
Okay.
they injected the bath salts, went into the woods, and it makes you superheated. So they ended up dead. They took their clothes off and they died of hypothermia. That was in Western Pennsylvania.
Uh huh.
In my neck of the woods in Wisner State Forest, the same thing happened. A state trooper did the bath salt, and don't ask me the connection between law enforcement and bath salts, but
Uh huh.
this state trooper did the monkey dust, the same thing. They found him there with his clothes off. Again, you're like burning up. You are so,
Right.
you
It
know,
raises your body heat. So. Uh
exactly.
huh.
And they found him dead, hypothermia, etc. Two separate parts of the state, the same drug, bath salts, aka monkey dust. So that wasn't Bigfoot, but that was pretty bizarre.
Well, you know what? Everybody here in Florida became aware of bath salts. I want to say it was maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago down in
Yeah,
South Florida. They
yeah.
had a homeless guy that did the bath salts and ended up eating another homeless guy's face off. He was
Oh,
like,
I remember. Yeah, I remember. Yeah,
same thing though. He had stripped off his clothing.
it was Miami. It was under the bridge.
Miami, yeah. It
Yeah,
was like under the bridge. It was like some type of homeless
yeah,
encampment.
yeah.
And he was totally, I mean,
Whacked
and
out.
that's, I think, the first time a lot of people became aware, had heard about bath salts. It was like,
Yeah,
as everybody's thinking of bath salts like you just described, something people like, you
yeah,
rub on when you're taking a bath.
yeah.
And
And, and all of these designer drugs, they promise you euphoria.
yeah,
Sex and music is going to be better and everything. But a lot of times, like I mean, you just get psychotic. I mean, it makes you crazy.
yeah.
People
And
people
and
die. So
and see, and I'm thinking maybe probably that guy might have even had mental issues before he took the
yeah,
bath
yeah,
salts.
yeah.
So yeah, there. But let me ask you, and I always heard that sometimes hypothermia in and of itself, I had heard that sometimes you do take off your clothing or something like that, that's why some people end up dying.
Yeah, I mean they're just burning up. They're just, and what
Yeah.
happens is I think it's your hypothalamus that's supposed to regulate the temperature. Like there's something wrong with it. With the bath salts will go and hijack that. But
Well, yeah,
but
like
this,
in other words, I mean, basically you hurry it along
Yeah,
to
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
and I'm sure you've heard of that disappearance of those hikers in the Dyatlov. Well, no, they did disappear. They were found, but they were in the
In
Dyatlov
Russia,
Pass in
in
Russia.
Russia, yeah.
And you know that there was always the theory that they were attacked by their version of the Bigfoot
Yeah,
that's up there
yeah.
because of the way that the bodies were so mangled up.
They were mangled.
And
It looked like they clawed their way from the inside out. I think that's what it was. I mean, I've read a bunch of articles about that. Yeah, that was pretty bizarre too. Yeah. So, and then
right, right. I mean, they were like, it wasn't that they just got frozen because
yeah,
they found three of them first, and then they found the other three like when the spring thaw came in because
uh-huh,
it was, and I mean they've always tried to explain that the conditions of the bodies were not something that could be caused because they froze to death,
yeah.
or that there was, in other words, there was violence done on the bodies. And as
Hmm.
far as I know, even though supposedly the government has closed it out, they still have never really been able to explain how they got the injuries they did.
Yeah, yeah. I think the last thing I read was the Russian government claimed that there was some weird meteorological anomaly that did something, and that's how they explained it. But I mean, the explanation was pretty bizarre too. So I don't know
And
if you,
but that thing, if I remember correctly, I want to say that area where they were at, I believe it was called the Mountain of the Dead to begin with. In other words, this place already didn't have the best reputation to begin with.
Mhm.
Whether it's just because people were getting lost or whatever was going on, but
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, let's go hiking. Where? To the Mountain of the Dead. It's like,
yeah, yeah,
oh, it's
yeah.
like that's where you
But
say,
these guys were good. They were expert skiers,
yes,
and they
yes.
were young. I mean, they belonged to a club, so
Mm-hmm.
what they were doing wasn't
That you
atypical.
can say, well, they didn't know what they were doing. They got
Yeah,
lost. They got,
yeah.
yeah,
They did know what they were doing.
yes. So again, that's one of those that there's a Bigfoot somewhere running around the background, possibly their version of it. Um, and they even looked. I believe they have the Mansies out there that are like native to that area. That they looked at them and they're like, no, it wasn't us.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and yeah, there's always. That's why I'm saying you always have some type of version of a Bigfoot in different. And I've heard, and I'm not that. I don't know if you've come across it out in Australia.
Oh,
The Yowli,
the Yowie, yeah, the
the
Yowie. Okay,
Yowli,
yeah,
right, right. And I was like, well, you know what? There's plenty of space out there because, from what I understand, the terrain and the landscape out there in Australia is pretty rough, but that there's
mhm.
plenty of spaces for it to be at. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah,
as far as like for it to exist and not be seen.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I did want to mention getting away from Australia for a second, but I'm going to be in Beverly Hills
Yes,
late next week. It's going to be Tuesday, January
yes,
28th. And what's interesting is that Mike Familiant from the In the Shadow of Red Eye, he's going to be there. So he's doing his tour. He's doing a circuit. I mean, this guy camps out, like even in weather like tonight, like, I mean, frigid weather. He's out there someplace. I mean, he's on his way in Maine coming down here to
mm-hmm.
Florida, but he's going to be there. And, I just can't wait. So this is going to be an exciting thing to maybe compare notes. And he's a true believer. I mean, he knows what he sees and he knows what he's looking for. So that's going to
Here we
be
go. This is, yeah. Let me show that there. This is
yeah, very good. Okay.
that thing that you're going to do out there,
Yeah. Oh,
Bigfoot
good. Okay. Yeah.
researcher. This is January 28th,
8th. Yep.
1 p.m. at Central Ridge Library in Beverly Hills, Florida.
Yeah. And that's in Citrus County.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're expecting that there's going to be a lot of folks from the paranormal and cryptid community that's going to be there. So I'm excited. I think we're going to have a good time and a good showing. And I like to see who's around. what kind of interest there is, and see if maybe we can't organize something like they do in, Miami and Orlando and some of
Yes,
these other
yes.
places. So I mean, I think the Gulf
Yeah.
Coast needs something like this. So hopefully,
And what's really good is it's a good source for people, the local people, to have tell the stories about what they've seen. Maybe they're, you know, a lot of times people have Bigfoot encounters or something. They're not looking per se to find one. They
yeah,
might just be out there hunting or whatever, and they see something. But they're like, "What is that?"
yeah.
They're
Well,
not. They're not.
and I
They're not
think
big.
some people have a gift. They have like
Yes.
an altered sense of perspective, something that's different than the rest of us. I mean, that they can
Mm-hmm.
sense things, see things, they're attuned to things, and I
Yes.
think it's a gift. And and these are the people that are seeing things, whether they're saucers, orbs, or cryptids. So I think some
Yeah.
people just have that gift.
You know what? Now that I want to say this real quick because you mentioned this gentleman that you're going to be with, how he goes out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
I want to say that for all those people, I just heard about this. My husband was the one that told me that three people out in Florida, or I want to say Georgia or Florida somewhere, they froze to death inside a tent.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. This would just happen a couple weeks ago. I think it
You
might have
know
been
what?
in.
And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Maybe some of these people, and I don't know the circumstances, I really don't, but you see some of these survivalist shows where you
Yeah.
see people in a tent, and it's like, those are special tents, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is your regular tent this is not a good place to hang out if you
Yeah.
got freezing weather. So yeah, sometimes people don't realize that to do that kind of work out there, especially in the fields, it's a special person. You need to know what you're doing. In other words,
Yeah, and boy, and I think you gotta back off on the alcohol. I think the alcohol is just going to go and mess with your metabolism. I mean, God, especially in frigid temperatures,
yes,
So
yes, that you realize that something along those lines. Yeah, sometimes people just don't understand what happens to your body under certain extremes of temperature, whether it's real cold or real hot,
hmm
depending on what you put in it.
yeah, yeah.
And I'm sure you've come across that, Max. The people that accidentally kill themselves by just being stupid.
I'm being stupid. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Did you have any thoughts about the New Jersey drone hysteria of
you know
2024?
what? I think I would honestly. I think I would. If I saw a drone, I'd be like, "What in the world is that?" But if I saw a drone as big as what they're describing, I would be very unhappy.
Yeah.
I would be very suspicious, and I would be even more upset if I called the police, which is probably the first call I'd make,
hmm
and they'd look at me, we don't know, and nobody knows. And I I don't know. Some people think, oh, it's comforting. If it was something menacing, they would do something about it. The fact that they didn't know that it's not. And I'm like, I still would not find that. I would not be very encouraged with that. And I'm going to tell you something. I see in the future um, where we're going to have to address that in far as privacy issues.
hmm
And this is the thing. You heard that they wanted to curtail anybody from flying drones. And I was like, wait, 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 wait. You're hobbyists. Why are you going to stop a hobbyist? If most of the time, all they're going to do is maybe fly it on their property, or
hmm
if they go somewhere, and maybe they'll have those regular little drones. I have one. It's a little thing. You know, those things, by the way, their battery life is maybe 15 or 20 minutes max.
Okay.
All right. Don't what's that saying? Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Don't
Good.
stomp.
Yeah.
Right. Don't stomp on the regular people having a drone and flying it around their yard or whatever they want to do, because now there's these huge drones, masses of them, from what I understand. That up to now, have you heard of that explanation of where they came from, who was sending them, or what they were doing?
No, it was frustrating for everybody because nobody was giving us the an explanation. Not the government. Nobody was, and
No.
you had a representative from South Carolina saying that they could be extraterrestrial. You
Right.
had a podcaster saying that terrorists stole a nuclear weapon from
Right.
Ukraine and brought it to New
Yes.
Jersey, and the
Yes.
government was flying drones to look for that heat and signature. So
Yes.
you
The
had all
materials.
these, yeah, all these crazy theories, and I think that people were just getting a little bit anxious and
Oh, of
hysterical.
course. Of course. It's like everybody is wondering, like, okay, this is not normal, but you expect us to think it's normal and it's not. Because where is it? And I think what's most surprising for most people is the authority or the government, where you want to call it, the local, state, whatever. It's just like, oh, we don't know what that is, so okay, whatever. And it's like, what do you mean, whatever?
Uh,
This is, I think, is the most disquieting thing, that you would think, hey, somebody would charge in there and go, wait a minute, bring that thing down right now, shoot it down to
yeah,
find out what it is.
yeah. It was almost like 1938, I think, Orson Welles' War of the Worlds,
Yes.
where we had that similar. It took place in New Jersey too. So, but
Yeah.
but um,
Oh yeah.
but even in 1938, people didn't think it was creatures from Mars. They thought it was another enemy, like maybe Germany or Russia.
Yeah, that people don't realize this was World War I.
Yeah,
Was, I mean, it had happened years ago, but still, there was people. A lot of people are alive that lived through World War I.
yeah, and then also with the drone hysteria of 2024, people didn't think it was flying saucers. They thought it was an enemy from either China or Russia or Iran. So
Anything. And
yeah,
you
yeah,
always think of, no, if anybody ever tried to do that, fly a plane, a blimp, a balloon, a drone, that thing would be shot out of the sky.
hmm,
Because you always hear that the airspace is protected, supposedly. And I
supposedly, yeah.
think I think a lot of people were very, very unpleasantly surprised to find that nothing. I'm waiting to see what happened. And same thing. Let's keep going with the where everybody's going. What's going on with the fires out in L.A., Max? What do you think about that?
I don't know. I mean, I hope to God that that's just a horrible natural disaster and not anything beyond that.
Let me tell
Um,
you, I have a friend of the family who lives out in Glendale, and I was texting him, "Hey, are you okay? Are you okay?"
yeah,
Because I was like, and he had to evacuate for like a day, and he said he came back, but then he was telling me that the air quality is horrible,
oh, I can
really, really
imagine. Yeah,
bad.
yeah,
And I was thinking, man, you know what? Everybody talks about the hurricanes in Florida, but at least you have a chance to get your stuff if you want to and leave.
yeah.
And a lot of people lost um, their belongings, their preciousnesses. I know that sounds very materialistic.
Well, but I mean, it's everything that you own. It's
Yeah,
your
it's your
life.
things
It's
that,
your
yeah.
photographs and memories.
Mm-hmm. Yep, yep, yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep. And I look at that, and it's like I've been in because I went to Hurricane Andrew, where stuff, I had stuff that I guess it ended up in Kansas that went out that my house because the windows blew out. So I kind of understood
Yeah.
what they were feeling, and I was looking at that, and it was like, man, this is a very, very bad feeling when you find yourself in that scenario where basically just you got to grab a couple of things and leave, because if not, you're going to be incinerated.
And look what happened last year in Asheville, North Carolina. I mean,
Oh God, that's so bad.
floods of biblical proportions. I mean, trillions of gallons of water.
Well,
So,
you know what? The thing is this, and I feel more sorry for these Carolina peoples, and I'll tell you why. From what I understand, these things with the fires in that area, they're always there. Okay.
mhm,
Uh, there's always been the thing hanging over the heads of all the people that live in that area, Palisades, of the fires.
mhm,
But these people that live in the Carolinas, this was not a hurricane area. They were out there, and they got I got a friend of a friend that said that a lady that we know, her son had moved up there. There were teachers. She moved out there. She was bought a mobile home close to her kids.
uh,
That thing got swept away.
uh,
Bye.
yeah,
And she got nothing. It was like, huh?
yeah. Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. Yeah, double
Yeah,
whammy.
yeah, they did a number on everybody. So
Yeah.
yeah, I kind of feel bad for those people because they didn't expect it. You don't prepare for something where all of a sudden you got, and if when you look at those pictures, It wasn't that, oh well, a tree came down, but you can fix it. There was nothing left.
Yeah,
Nothing
yeah,
left.
yeah,
So it's yeah. It's like if you want to talk about crazy weather, this is the time for it. And even now, the like I said, we have snow in Florida and on the Gulf Coast.
yeah.
Yay!
Uh,
But
yeah,
you know
it's
what? It's one of those things that, like everything else, it'll come and go, and you know,
yeah,
I'm just waiting for the UFO to land on the somewhere like on I-95, that kind of deal. So let's see.
yeah. I did want to show you my next project, if I may.
Yes, of course.
This is Paranormal Apocalypse.
Okay.
This how it ends, and there's the that's a gray as a
Oh, what is that about?
well, it's about how the world ends, and I take a look at fear. I take a look at how humans are manipulated by using our fear. I
Sure.
talk about how H.P. Lovecraft was the one who identified that fear is the most basic emotion that man has, and it's fear of the unknown that's the most powerful.
Sure.
So,
I believe it.
religious leaders, political leaders know this, and they are the puppet masters that uh, control us through that fear. If you don't follow my rules, you're going to go to hell. If you don't follow my
Mm.
rules, you're going to go into prison, etc.
I
So
think that a lot of forecasters and psychics, the ones that tell the future, they make a lot of money that way too. Because
yeah,
that's what everybody does. When they contact a psychic, it's almost tell me what's going to happen.
yeah, yeah,
You know, give me a forecast of the future, or
yeah. So we'll see what
you
happens.
know,
But I got about 7 chapters done. I'm going to have it done this year. I'm working on it, pretty much diligently, and I can't wait. I think it's going to be a new area other than Bigfoot and the paranormal. It's something else, another area that
well, I think, Max, that like when you made mention of what Orson Welles did, of course, with the use of the radio, that's basically what wigged everybody out, is that now we have the internet, which everything is instant information.
yeah,
So all of a sudden, something horrible happens, and that fear, that industry of fear kind of thing, it spreads rapidly, right away, instantaneously.
hmm
I mean, it's a good thing because people get informed, but the flip side of it is that when these things, that fear mongering, all of a sudden it extrapolates, and all of a sudden it becomes this huge thing. Did you hear that? Did you? Oh my God!
yeah, yeah, yeah,
You know, and then before you know it, all the Chicken Littles are running around
exactly,
and
yeah,
filling up
yeah,
the churches. I'm just
yeah,
kidding, but
yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah,
we tend to follow one another, and we get scared
yes,
easy, and then
absolutely,
that's why people join cults, because they
yes,
they go to cults for protection, because this cult
yes.
leader is going to take care of me and all this. So
Well, they've done studies on the personalities of people that end up in cults, and believe it or not, to some people you go, you got to be kidding, but the feeling of being told this is how you're going to behave, this is what you're going to believe, this is even sometimes who you're going to marry, all that decisions, that big decisions in your life, they crave something in their personality or in their mind, craves that somebody else is stepping in and making these decisions for them.
hmm
Okay, they're losing their freedom, obviously,
yeah, yeah,
but there's something in them that they want, that
hmm
absence of making a decision. Somebody will make it for me, those major life decisions.
yeah,
So
yeah.
like,
You trade your autonomy and your freedom for being
yes,
submissive, but what you get is maybe a protector or somebody who claims that they're going to protect you and take care of you. So it's
and ultimately victimizes them, really.
exactly, yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
what you hear from all these people that eventually break out of a cult,
hmm
that live to get out of a cult in some cases.
yeah,
They all say it. Looking back at it, they realize, yeah, I thought I was going to get this, but this is really what it ended up being.
hmm
And in some cases you hear some of these places, you basically, I'm sure you heard of people that have to be extracted out of cults because
and
they,
reprogrammed.
yeah,
Yeah,
yep, that,
yeah. I did a podcast with somebody from Northern California,
mm-hmm,
and I think it was his mother or one of his relatives was involved in that Jim Jones Guyana cult. That was what,
okay,
1987, 1978, I believe.
right, yeah, I want to say it was late 70s, yes.
78. And she almost went there. And a lot
Okay.
of these people, they turned over their money to Jim Jones,
Yes.
and he claimed there was
Yes.
going to be a race war and all this stuff, and they had to
Yeah.
get away. And he used
Yes.
fear. He used
Yes.
fear with these people, and some people bought into it. I mean, it was a mass type of thing. I mean, a lot of people went over there, and he claimed it was paradise, and it was nothing but that. I mean, there were a lot of bugs, and it wasn't very good planning conditions, and
You know that there was more that for some reason, I don't know, maybe there was a couple of cults being run out of Guyana. You know that, right? There was another one by another American. God, what was he called
oh,
himself?
at the same time.
Yes, at the same time.
Oh
Yep,
no, I didn't
yep.
know that. No.
He was this as a matter of fact, he eventually he called himself I think it was called the House of Israel,
Okay.
and
Okay.
the guy, the leader, was a fugitive.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, and he called himself master or king, or they had to call him God.
Yeah. Right.
And his real name was David Hill,
Okay.
and this was around the same time when Jones, he poisoned, and he ended up going to jail there in Guyana. I think it was, I don't think it was murder. It was something like manslaughter, and he did like 15 years in prison. But people don't realize that there was more than one type of cult that had moved out there,
Oh, okay.
um, to Guyana. And the only thing I can think of is the absence of that nobody was going to mess with you, that you could do whatever you want. Whereas if you
Mhm.
stayed in the United States, you were going to get authority saying, hey, 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 what are you doing? And
Mhm.
out there, you could kill people, do whatever you wanted, and they didn't care unless, you got carried away, I imagine. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's more than one cult that was going out there.
Yeah.
So,
Crazy. Crazy. Yeah.
yeah, crazy is the word for no. As for how can I say this? For all the crazy leaders, I look at the followers and I'm like, no, the crazy ones here are you people.
Mhm.
Especially when you have children, that you drag into that.
Mhm.
Um, Max, for my podcast listeners, what's your website? So if they want to go and visit your
Yeah,
website.
it's www.maximfurek.com, www.maximfurek.com. And if any of your listeners were interested in any of my books, whether it's
Okay.
Lost Tribes of Bigfoot or Coal Region Hoodoo, I have
Okay.
7 books, but they could look on my website and see it. I'll be glad to uh, give them a good deal on an autographed copy. And then, of
Okay.
course, they could also check them out on Amazon.com. So
Right.
either way would be fine. And I would encourage your listeners that if they did purchase any of my books, to please place a review on Amazon, which helps us authors quite a bit. I mean, it's a great thing to do.
Right. 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 Exactly. Which is, let's face it. Everybody does this. When you go to Amazon, you always look to see, hey, what do people like it? You know. So absolutely to leave feedback, and there it is, the Lost Tribes of Bigfoot.
Yeah,
You
it's a
know,
great, great
there.
book. Has what's
Yeah.
called IBT, Immersive Book Technology.
Mm-hmm.
Has QR codes, and there's a bunch of videos of me doing a synopsis of the chapters. It's really pretty unique. I
Excellent.
think cutting edge technology for books. So we're
Excellent.
pleased to be part of that Hangar One publishing group.
Okay. Excellent. All right, and I'll have a link in the credits of the show, Max. I want to thank you so much. It's been absolutely wonderful. We'll be talking, and I'm going to try to make it out to the Beverly Hills presentation.
Oh, good. Okay.
No, wait, no,
No,
wait,
that's
wait.
the 28th. Now you can't make it there,
No, I
but you
can't
might.
make it. I was going to
You're
say,
going to
no, I
try to
might
make
do
it to
some.
the Ocala Bigfoot
Yes,
thing.
to the
Okay. Yeah.
Ocala. Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. All right, till we
Okay.
see each other again.
Okay.
Take
Stay
care, man.
warm, and thanks for your friendship. And
On the contrary, it's my pleasure.
okay. See you, Marlene.
All right. Oh, I cut him off. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Shoot. But anyway, I think Max is super interesting because I think what he's talking about Bigfoot is everybody. There's it's almost like the same thing with UFOs. There's these people that have you know, are these extraterrestrials? Are they friendly? Are they not friendly? Are the Greys real or are they biomechanical? Are the Nordics or the reptoid? There's, in other words, within the community of whatever that subject is, there's all these different, and some people, which I consider myself one, we're more fluid. We're like, okay, well, explain that theory to me, or why do you think that? And then there's the hardcore people, which is like, no, this is it, and that's not it. Same thing with a Bigfoot. There's the people that are strictly, it's an animal, maybe unrecognized or undocumented or whatever, but it's just an animal. There's nothing mystical, metaphysical, nothing. It doesn't, you know, go into another dimension and then come back, or it has no connection to UFOs or extraterrestrials. It's just strictly an animal, period. Right? And then there's others that think, yeah, it's an animal, but that somehow or other it has that ability. And then you get the people that will go into it's the extraterrestrials somehow or other have some type of power or ability to manipulate not only Bigfoot, but other types of cryptids. All right. Whether it's sending them through maybe some type of portal, interdimensional portal. Like I said, and then there's other ones that say no, they just maybe somewhere in their existence they figure it out when a portal's going to open to let let's say a UFO or an extraterrestrial come through, and they've realized, hey, when this happens or when you feel this or it's going to open, and they just poof, they jump through and they come into our world. All right. Again, these are all theories which might be never proved or disproven, because that's the thing about this whole thing. It's not a question of, well, you can't prove it. Yeah, but nobody's has disproved it either. So it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Yeah. God, I've interviewed Ron Moorhead. I've heard recordings that he's captured out in this area in the Northwest. And those things, I mean, I'm not an outdoors person, man, whatever. But that doesn't sound like anything. If I heard that whoops and that chatter that he's recorded and the noises, I'd be thinking I'm in the jungle somewhere. Like, you don't think that this is the kind of noise that you would hear in a forest up in the Northwest area of the United States. It doesn't, I couldn't, like, what would make that noise? And by the way, this is not like, well, that's very, well, you're not sure what that is. It's very ambiguous. No, you will clearly hear what those things are. You can clearly hear that those are like hollers and chatterings, and I'd be like, well, let me tell you something. I'd be like, I'm going home if at the first crack of dawn. Yeah. Because I'd be like, I'm out of my depth in this. I'm out of my depth. And I think that everybody's fascinated by Bigfoot, first of all, because they're very humanoid looking. All right. Plus, let's face it, the discovery of a Bigfoot that are alive, hopefully alive, would be like, wow. I mean, that would be ground, the science community, everybody would be like, well, incredible. It would be an incredible find. It would turn all the theories and or even hard and fast rules about evolution on its head, because then it would be so many alternatives to what's been established by academics as this is what happened to us, or how we came to be where we're at. And for all those people that were saying, nah, man, all these crazy people running around looking for Bigfoot, they're just crazy. There's no such thing out there. I think there is. Now, whether this is an animal that's slowly becoming less in numbers because maybe they just don't have enough members to procreate, we don't know. We don't know. Or they just have retreated further and further. There's a lot of areas nobody's ever explored. All right. Or areas so vast that even if you had a couple of people that came in, they'd just be like, oh, well, move over there. And then when they leave, we come back. Because remember, what a terrain or an environment that we consider inhospitable to us It's like, who can live out here? For some other types of forms of life, like something that is uh got fur on it or hair and has got maybe layers of fat underneath its skin, they can survive it just fine. That there's a food source, yeah, there is food source. I've heard of people saying that that Bigfoot, they just like the bears, they go in after salmon and some of these rivers. In other words, that they're omnivorous. They eat whatever they find: meat, fish, berries, whatever they come across. All right. For all we know, maybe they even do a version of hibernation where when the winter comes in, and maybe the food source dries up, they maybe don't hibernate full time like a bear, but they'll find a place like a cave and just hang out. You know? Or maybe they even store food there somehow. I mean, there's a I mean, it could be that's a long, deep rabbit hole as to what they do. Like that, like what he was saying. Well, what do they do? Survive. That's what all animals do, is survive. Survive and procreate. Or try, whenever the mating season or whatever. Survive, procreate, protect their young. And in other words, self-preservation and preservation of the species. And the first thing, the first law is to survive, you must eat. That's how you guarantee self-preservation, and that's how you guarantee preservation of the species. Uh, Whether it's that you live long enough to procreate, and then that you protect the young, so that they in turn. I think that's the driving force behind most species, as far as like not like us, like, well, what are you doing? I gotta go to work. When your daily effort is tied into, I need to eat. I need to make sure I can wake up tomorrow, and that I've eaten enough so that I can go out and hunt or eat or whatever it is, however I get their food. And if I have young, even more so. So yeah, it's, yeah, sometimes it's one of those things. When you least expect it, maybe somebody will come up with. And let's face it, at this point, I think that people are so, how's this, are so skeptical about any proof because of all the doctoring that you could do with Photoshop or anything, or a film, that I think short of an actual body, alive or dead, nobody's ever going to be convinced of the existence of a Bigfoot. It would have to be something tangible, totally tangible. Like I said, yes, you hear the whoops and the calls and the even the films or the photographs and this and that. At this point, most people, with good reason, by the way, are kind of on the cynical side that none of this will ever mean anything unless there's proof positive that. And by this I mean, because I've even heard of people bringing in hair samples. That's not going to cut it. Poop, no, it's not going to cut it. None of that. No, no, no. It's going to have to be an actual, either a live one, dead one, skeletal, something that can be taken to a laboratory and said, "Yep, this is not a known animal," or the DNA, something. Outside of that, no. That again, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. And you even hear of some hunters that have lost, deer that they've been hunting, and they'll swear up and down that it was a Bigfoot that took it, because all of a sudden they've shot the deer and they've gone to get it and the deer's not there. Or they find trail of blood, things of this nature. Like, let's face it, who's gonna take a whole deer? That kind of deal. Um, and I think, again, I think those are the best stories. The people that are out there that are not per se, they're not looking to have a Bigfoot experience. They're just out there doing whatever it is. They're camping, they're hunting, they're fishing, or just having time, and they have an encounter. And I agree with Max, what he's saying about that most people see that they're kind of curious about us, but they're not really afraid, but they don't really want to interact with us, and they kind of want to stay out of our way and hope we return the favor. But I want to say there's always the part where you get one of these animals that needs to eat and is either gotten old or it's been hurt and it can't go after its its food source. And let's face it, something as big as that needs protein, as in meat. Might not be the only thing it eats, but I'm sure that it needs something along those lines. What does it do? How does it, it can't hunt for whatever reason. It got hurt, it's just gotten old, or it's just sick. It got sick. And are these the ones that, come around to where people are camping, campsites, the ones that risk being seen by a hunter because they know the hunter is hunting, is going to bring down some type of prey. And they're like, yeah, like if I don't take this, if I don't risk being seen, I'm not going to be able to eat. And it's like everything. Even, I mean, when the fishing boats go out, that you'll have the schools of gulls follow it. Why? Because they know that, a bunch of food comes off of these, boats chumming or, things of the fish and stuff. So they follow it around. And I think that in some cases, some Bigfoot will also do the same thing. They follow hunters around, hoping that they'll just, hey, you'll do the heavy lifting for me. You'll shoot that deer that I need to eat. Things of that nature. Or why don't we go down? Or you become because I know that people, and I could tell a lot of people don't ever want to go there. Nobody ever wants to go there, which is that given a chance, would a Bigfoot take a human being as prey? Nobody wants to go there. Everybody wants to play the, no, they're curious about us. They just observe us. They want to stay out of our hair and hope that we do the same. And nobody ever wants to look at our Bigfoot, look at us as, hey, you look pretty good to me and you're about the size of a deer, whatever. And I think that's something most people, and by this they're like, oh, you want to like make the Bigfoot like a predator. And I'm like, I would think that it is a predator. Might not only eat meat, but, and let's face it, predators in and of themselves are opportunists when it comes to eating. They're opportunists because, like I said, that's what you do all day. It's look for things to eat. And maybe under normal circumstances, Bigfoot wouldn't take a man or woman or child. But again, maybe under other circumstances, it's forced to. It's sick. It's hurt. It's old. Maybe it's been ostracized from their group. This is just me. Whatever. And it's hungry. And it sees some guy out there running around by himself and says, well, you know what? Normally I wouldn't eat that guy, but I'm really hungry and he looks really good. And that happens. I think that I don't think that's far-fetched at all. I don't think that is far-fetched at all. And I know a lot of people in the Bigfoot world don't ever want to go there. But I don't understand why. Because I do believe that, like all things, like, what is it? Life finds a way? Quoting from Jurassic Park. But anyway, guys, I hope you like this show. I love speaking to Max. Yeah, hopefully I want to make that paranormal conference. It's in April here in Ocala, I believe, is where they're going to hold it at. They're going to have a Bigfoot conference. They have some very good speakers, by the way. And go out there and meet people. As a matter of fact, I met a gentleman. I have one of his videos. I don't know if it's been released yet. Tim T from Florida. He's a local Bigfoot guy here. We've got an interview with him. Very interesting because a lot of his sightings are from here, from the Ocala National Forest. Very interesting stuff. So please sign up for my newsletter at miamighostchronicles.com or at mpellicer.com. You can find links to all the other video podcast series, Nightshade Diary, Stories of the Supernatural, Supernatural Storytime, Eerie.news. It's all there. But the newsletter on Substack is the best way to stay in touch with me. And I've got some interesting guests coming up, lined up for 2025. And like I said, man, if this is what we're getting at the beginning of the year, I don't know what's gonna happen with the rest of the year. I don't know, such crazy stuff. Like I said, man, once upon a time, you had like maybe one weird event a year. Like, oh, did you remember when that happened? Next thing you know, it's like, nah, it's like every other week. Everything is like, God, it's snowing where in Florida? Yeah. Never happened before. It's like, okay, why not? So, yeah, God knows. A lot of interesting, though. A lot of, so, what is that? Hold tight. Here we go. Just think of it. Like when you're getting up on the roller coaster and you're climbing up and you know that when you get to the crest, it's going to go, whoosh. Well, that's what it feels like sometimes. It's like, hold tight. Who knows what's coming? And I guess maybe 2025 will be hopefully at the end of 2025, we'll have more good memories than, disturbing one. So anyway, guys, till next time, thank you for being part of my audience. You are all wonderful. Take care.